The man Asher had been keeping, the one with no memory, was in the hospital room when Caleb called. He forced Leo to his knees, demanding an apology. But Asher rose, his eyes sharp as flint, and pushed Caleb back into a corner. He warned Caleb that if he touched Leo again, he would be picking his teeth up with a broken hand. Turning back, Asher suppressed his fury and gathered Leo into his arms, a gesture meant to be comforting. It seemed he had mistaken his benefactor. He pulled Leo close, his voice a low murmur against his hair, promising that no one would dare lay a hand on him as long as he was alive. In truth, no one would dare even if he were dead. Leo's legs had simply gone weak from low blood sugar. He wasn't some fragile thing to be broken. It was just that Caleb was drunk, and Leo couldn't be bothered to argue with a fool who couldn't see straight. Asher held him so tightly that Leo could feel the hard planes of his abdomen through the thin hospital gown. They were of a similar height, possessed a similar intensity, but Asher willingly bowed his head, resting it on Leo's shoulder. The powerful, unfamiliar scent of him was nearly suffocating. Leo was speechless, caught in the bizarre tableau, unsure how to proceed. He could only glance at Caleb, the one person who could defuse this escalating mess. After all, Caleb had started it. Asher, noticing Leo's diverted gaze, pinched his chin, forcing his head back around. The strength in his grip was possessive, as if he wanted to meld Leo into his own body. He questioned what was so appealing about that other man's face, insisting that Leo look only at him. The warmth of his breath ghosted across Leo's ear. Even at their closest, Caleb had never been so brazenly forward. A flush crept up Leo's neck, hot and uncontrollable. Caleb wiped a smear of blood from his lip with a fingertip and staggered to his feet. He told Asher that he had the wrong person. Even after being struck, his voice to Asher was placating, a courtesy Leo was never afforded. Asher looked down at him with cold condescension, the way one might look at a stray dog baring its teeth. Perhaps it was that look, or the sight of Asher's protective hold on Leo, that finally made Caleb snap. He shouted, his voice raw with fury, that Asher had the wrong damn person. This was a new level of desperation for Caleb. When his first round of financing had collapsed and bankruptcy loomed, he had merely downed 2 bottles of scotch and locked himself in his study for a day. When he emerged, his eyes, fraught with worry, had met Leo's as he promised everything was fine, that they still had time. It seemed the older he got, the more his temper frayed. He was a man who had made no real progress at all. Asher ignored him, his focus entirely on Leo. He stated his belief in what Leo said, the possessiveness in his eyes stark and almost frightening. Leo had intended to correct the misunderstanding, but one look at Caleb's venomous expression changed his mind. He affirmed Asher's delusion, asking why else Asher would carry his photo in the inner pocket of his jacket. He reached into Asher's discarded jacket and produced the worn photograph from the wallet inside. The knot of resentment in his chest loosened the moment the words were out. He raised a hand, tracing the sharp line of Asher's Adam's apple. For a moment, Asher fell silent, turning his head with a shy dip. His hair brushed against Leo's neck, the gesture reminiscent of a loyal, affectionate Doberman. Leo could suddenly understand Caleb's fascination. He felt it too. Caleb's face went white with rage, his teeth gritted. He accused Leo of being sick, of taking advantage of an amnesiac to steal him away. Asher's expression turned instantly glacial. He warned Caleb that another insult would ensure he never left the hospital ward. Leo just smiled at Caleb, mouthing 2 silent words, "He's mine." Caleb's veins pulsed in his neck, but he was powerless against Asher. Asher took the photo from Leo's hand. It was one he'd taken in secret. In it, Leo was crouching on the pavement, a neighborhood stray cat rubbing its head obediently against his palm, its tail curled around his wrist. Leo hadn't even noticed him standing a few meters away. Later, Asher had followed him to the parking garage. Sensing he was being tailed, Leo had reacted on instinct, smashing a heavy glass sculpture he just bought at a gallery over Asher's head. By the time he realized Asher meant no harm, blood was already matting his hair. It was only after rushing him to the emergency room that Leo discovered the sordid connection between him and Caleb. Asher narrowed his eyes at Caleb and told him to get out. Caleb left, his reluctance palpable in every step. The moment the door clicked shut, Asher's hand was on Leo's wrist. He asked him to stay. Leo, glancing at Asher's bandaged head, promised he would just say a few words and be right back. In the hallway, Caleb heard his footsteps and turned, his sneer cold. He questioned if Leo wasn't afraid of what would happen when Asher remembered, suggesting he might kill him. Leo's lips curled into a slight smile. He retorted that it didn't matter who ended up hurt, as long as a lesson was learned from the pain. It was, he added, a fine way to recoup his losses. Caleb's glare was murderous. He warned Leo that if he wanted revenge, he should come at him directly and stop his insane games. Leo cut him off with a half-smile, asking if Caleb wasn't the one who knew best just how sane he really was. Asher was lying in the hospital bed, his head propped on a pillow, swathed in thick gauze. Leo was hit with the memory of Asher's hair against his shoulder. A little coarse, prickly, and strangely comforting. Asher clutched the photograph to his chest. The moment he saw Leo enter, a smile spread across his face, lighting up his eyes. He tried to say Leo's name, but his mind went blank. Leo asked if his head hurt. Asher just looked at him with a wounded expression, saying nothing. Leo moved closer, his palm coming up to rest gently on Asher's head before ruffling his hair. He asked if Asher had been trying to say his name. He explained that the doctor said he had amnesia, and it was okay if he didn't remember. Asher's voice was muffled when he finally spoke, a heartbreaking edge to it. He said that the other man, Caleb, had called him Leo. He couldn't recall any memories of him, and a shadow of loneliness crossed his features. Fool, Leo thought. Even with his memory intact, he held no place in Asher's mind. And coincidentally, Asher now held no place in his. Asher's complete trust only made the lie easier to spin. Leo glanced at the patient card clipped to the bedside table. He calmly told Asher that his name was Leo. He cautioned him not to forget. Before he could finish the sentence, Asher's hand was on the back of his neck, pulling him down for a kiss. The wet, urgent touch caught Leo completely off guard, his eyes flying open. Asher's movements were fierce, leaving no room for resistance. A choked sound escaped Leo's throat as he pressed a hand against Asher's shoulder, a futile attempt to push him away. Asher didn't relent until the coppery taste of blood filled Leo's mouth. His lips were swollen, a deep, bruised red. He undid the top 2 buttons of his shirt, an air of raw sensuality about him. Leo meant to shove him off, but looking at that face, his hand froze in midair. It was true what they said about humans being visual creatures. Asher's lips curved into a smile. Before Leo could process it, he was pushed onto the bed. Asher flipped him over, pressing him into the mattress, and unwrapped a piece of hard candy, slipping it into Leo's mouth. With deft fingers, he unbuckled Leo's belt. His gaze roamed over Leo's body, inch by inch, as he whispered that he had stamina. Before Leo could reply, Asher's palm came to rest over the frantic beating of his heart. Leo gritted his teeth, turning his head away. But a volatile mix of nervousness and excitement sent his pulse racing faster than it ever had before. A faint smile played in Asher's eyes as his long, artistic fingers traced patterns on Leo's chest, a dance for him alone. It was exquisite. Asher was deliberately tormenting him. A low groan escaped Leo's throat. He unfastened the last button. Just as he was about to do more, a nurse walked in with medication. Leo's heart seized. He couldn't imagine the sight he must be. Shirt agape, belt undone, a wide expanse of skin exposed. A thrill of illicit betrayal, more potent than adrenaline, shot through his brain. With lightning speed, Asher pulled the quilt up, covering Leo completely. He stood, straightening his own clothes. The nurse blinked at the large, person-shaped lump under the covers and couldn't help but admonish them to be mindful of appearances. She advised abstinence until his body had recovered. Asher's expression was calm, showing no embarrassment at being caught. He agreed. After the nurse left, Leo slowly refastened his buttons and rebuckled his belt. To think that at 26, he could feel such an urgent desire for someone he'd known for less than a day. Asher's gaze lingered on his collar with unfulfilled hunger. Leo pointedly created distance between them, stating his intention to follow the doctor's advice. Asher merely locked the door, remarking that doctors always exaggerated and now no one would disturb them. Leo had to admit he was wrong. This wasn't a Doberman. It was a fox. Bloody scratches marked Asher's neck where Leo's control had failed. His movements were relentless, tireless. Leo hoarsely berated him for his lack of restraint. Asher didn't reply, his actions below simply growing more ruthless. He was doing it on purpose. He didn't stop until the moon was high in the sky. The younger ones were certainly different. Suddenly, the idea of being this man's benefactor didn't seem impossible. Asher had a fever. It was the consequence of their lack of restraint, or perhaps just a low-grade fever from autonomic dysfunction following the concussion. Delirious, he threw off the quilt and insisted Leo sleep with him, his touch as hot as a furnace. He repeated Leo's name with a familiarity that suggested he'd said it 1,000 times, though he'd known him for only a day. Afraid of making him sicker, Leo relented. Asher pressed against him, content. He murmured that he was thirsty, his lips dry and cracked. Leo got up to get water, but by the time he returned, Asher was asleep. He dipped a cotton swab in water and gently moistened his lips. Asher sank deeper into the pillow, sleeping soundly. He muttered in his sleep about how cold Leo's hands were, then let out a sigh from deep in his throat that made Leo's own hands tremble. Rubbing his throbbing temples, Leo went out to get a thin blanket from a nurse. To prevent Asher from risking his health further, he spent the night on the small sofa. He vaguely heard movement in the night but was too exhausted to care. The door was locked. A sick man with amnesia couldn't get far. When he opened his eyes again, Asher's face was inches from his own. "Morning," Asher rasped, his voice thick from a cold. He explained that he'd woken in the night to use the bathroom and had seen Leo looking pathetic on the sofa. With a stuffy nose, he warned Leo not to look at him like that. He had a cold and couldn't kiss him, but he might make an exception if Leo insisted. Who wanted to kiss him? The narcissism was astounding. Asher's injuries weren't severe. The test results came back normal, aside from temporary retrograde amnesia. He was cleared to go home and rest. He had no phone, and there was no one at his apartment. His clothes were blood-stained, so Leo had no choice but to take him to his own place. Asher wore a gray sweatsuit Leo had found in his closet, an outfit Leo had always considered too flamboyant for himself. On Asher, with his broad shoulders, narrow waist, and long legs, it looked like it was made for him, exuding a comfortable, domestic feel. The man could make a garbage bag look like haute couture. The only jarring notes were the 2 small bandages on his neck, covering the scratches Leo had left, which only drew more attention to them. The doctor recommended a light, nutritious diet. It sounded like a hassle, but one look at Asher's wan face had Leo heading to the supermarket. Asher held the grocery bag in one hand and insisted on lacing his fingers through Leo's with the other. Leo called him childish. Asher countered that if he couldn't kiss him, he should at least be allowed to hold his hand. He was a patient, he argued, and his emotional needs had to be met. Leo was rendered speechless. Before he could form a response, he saw Caleb standing at the entrance to his apartment building, an unwelcome sight. He felt a sudden urge to have someone break the man's legs. Asher followed his gaze. "What rotten luck," he muttered, the disgust in his voice undisguised. Caleb's brow furrowed, his eyes landing on Asher's hand clasped tightly in Leo's. His gaze was glacial. He told Asher he had something to say to him. Asher's lips twisted into a smirk, and he enunciated each word clearly, stating that Leo had lied to him about everything. He told Caleb he had originally liked him. Caleb, thinking Asher's memory had returned, relaxed his frown, his expression softening. But before he could speak, Asher sneered, adding that he had amnesia, not a brain defect. He questioned how he could ever fall for something so unpleasant. Leo muttered under his breath that apparently only he was blind enough to have done so. Asher's tone became more sincere, more determined, as if the first 2 sentences were just a passing amusement. Richie, the stray cat who often lounged downstairs, trotted over to Caleb and rubbed against his leg. Caleb sneered, "Where did this filthy thing come from?" and kicked the cat away. Richie let out a pained yowl. Hearing it, something in Leo snapped. He clenched his fist and struck Caleb squarely on the temple. Caleb, accustomed to deference, had never been treated this way. With a fluid motion, Leo kicked the back of his knee. Caught off guard, Caleb crumpled to the ground, the sound of bone hitting concrete sickeningly dull. His face went pale with pain. Asher scooped up Richie, checking him over. The cat was unharmed, just bruised from the fall. The cut on Caleb's lip had barely healed, and now his eyes burned with unrestrained fury. Leo curled his lip and stepped on Caleb's hand. He told him to be thankful for his mercy. Otherwise, he might have to spend the rest of his life on his knees. Caleb screamed that he was a lunatic. Leo, tired of the argument, called security to have him removed. The confrontation with Caleb wasted a significant amount of time. It was nearly noon by the time Leo finished preparing a meal. He placed dried seaweed, tiny dried shrimp, cilantro, and a dash of soy sauce in the bottom of a bowl and poured boiling broth over it. He then ladled in the wontons and sprinkled more cilantro on top. The steam rising from the porcelain white bowl made the figure across the table seem distant and blurry. For a fleeting moment, through the haze, he saw Caleb from their college days, sitting where Asher now sat, smiling at him. That was before the animosity had curdled into a desire to see each other destroyed. If Caleb hadn't transferred the copyrights of all his works, Leo would probably still be trailing behind him like a devoted dog. The moment their gazes met, Asher's brow furrowed. Even though Leo looked away quickly, Asher had noticed. He had been looking at someone else through him. A storm of possessiveness gathered in Asher's eyes. In the next second, he stood, his hands clamping down on Leo's shoulders, his fingers digging in so hard they nearly broke the skin. His warm lips pressed against Leo's ear as he bit out each word, telling him to look closer, to see clearly. "I'm not him." Whenever Caleb was near, Asher became like a rabid dog off its leash, fierce and unyielding. But he was wrong about one thing. Leo didn't like Caleb. He was disgusted by him. They had met in college. On the debate team, Leo had been ruthless, using any means necessary to win. He would dissect his opponent's arguments with a cold face, seizing on their weaknesses and attacking relentlessly. He had left a trail of offended rivals, Caleb among them. After one particularly brutal match, Caleb, far from being angry, had just smiled and shaken his head, admitting defeat. He'd slung an arm over Leo's shoulder and asked if he wanted to get dinner. Leo rarely socialized, preferring his own company. Others whispered behind his back that he was arrogant. Later, when Caleb learned of Leo's schizophrenia, his expression was one of pity. The sudden physical affection had startled Leo. He thought Caleb saw him differently, that he was special to him. He realized too late that Caleb only ever saw him as a tool, to be discarded after use. Why would one pity a money-making machine? Caleb had a plan from the beginning. A lonely, sensitive, genius madman was an easy target, willing to be caged for a sliver of affection. Leo had been appallingly stupid, completely defenseless. Caleb used him as a stepping stone, climbing higher and higher, while Leo remained trapped in the illusion of love he had so carefully constructed. Just when Leo thought things might get better, Caleb's world collapsed. He had developed a gambling addiction and accrued an astronomical debt. By the time he tried to stop, it was too late. He knelt before Leo, his eyes red-rimmed, claiming he had lost his way and would never stray again. Upon learning of the debt, Leo had liquidated all his savings. But Caleb went behind his back and sold the copyright to all of his works, his unfinished manuscripts, even the last portrait he had painted of his mother. Because of the power of attorney Leo had signed, he had no legal recourse. Caleb had even used shell contracts to evade taxes and maximize his own profits. From the fortune his art had generated, the amount transferred to Leo's bank account was a mere few $100s. How could anyone trust the word of a gambler? Caleb didn't use the money to pay off his debts. He used it as seed capital to invest in a pharmaceutical company, which took off. At the time, Leo believed he was working hard for their future. His own mental illness disqualified him from participating in clinical trials, shattering his own ambitions. A painter with schizophrenia was not necessarily a great artist, but an artist with mental illness was a gimmick worth hyping. No one wants to be called a madman, but for Caleb it was a marketing tool. With bold colors and delicate brushwork, amplified by his backstory, Leo became a celebrated avant-garde painter. He put Caleb's name on all his research papers. Those results, that data, were dazzling. Caleb started to get noticed. Rumors began to circulate that Caleb had a young lover on the side, on whom he spent lavishly. A villa, a luxury car. Leo heard them but refused to believe them. But the once unknown Caleb transformed into the formidable CEO everyone deferred to. The first thing he did was break up with Leo. He said the line that now separated them was class. He sneered that if Leo knelt and licked his boots, he might still be interested in playing with him for a while. He said he didn't want to be associated with a crazy person, that Leo made him sick. Oh, he called Leo disgusting. Just when Leo thought Caleb might leave him in peace, he appeared at his gallery opening, carrying bottles of wine. At the pinnacle of Leo's success, Caleb dragged him down from the altar. Asher was supposed to be there, but he had a hospital follow-up that day. Caleb scattered copies of Leo's medical records across the floor, the final snowflake in an avalanche. What a rare genius. He's a psychopath, he slurred. He goaded the crowd, asking if they knew what kind of person they admired, if someone like him deserved to be liked. He grabbed Leo's arm, pushing up his sleeve to reveal a hideous scar on his wrist. Scrutinizing eyes fell on Leo like knives. The long-healed scar burned. Leo listened to his drunken tirade with a cold face, then picked up a wine bottle and smashed it over his head. He drove the broken glass into Caleb's chest. He had actually been getting better. His doctor had said he could stop his medication. But Caleb still shrieked for everyone to see how crazy he was. The scene devolved into chaos. As scarlet filled Leo's vision and he lunged to finish the job, Asher appeared. He pushed through the crowd and grabbed Leo's hand, the one still holding the broken bottle. Asher covered the scar on Leo's wrist with his own hand. His gaze was soft, affectionate. He whispered Leo's name, a farewell and a plea. Leo, listen to me. Let go. Leo, let go. The glass shattered on the floor. Heavy rain began to fall, mist rising from the pavement. The world was drenched, raindrops dripping from the eaves of an umbrella Asher held over them. Only Asher was dry and warm. He wore a black wool coat and pulled Leo into his arms. He smelled faintly of cedar, like the inside of Leo's own wardrobe. The frantic, wandering part of Leo's soul suddenly settled. It felt like a quiet street lined with blossoming trees in April, like the warm belly of a sun-drenched cat. It made him never want to let go. Asher, he had called his name over and over, his eyes red. He didn't know why, only that saying it grounded him. He was too dizzy to hold up his head. His face was buried in Asher's neck, pale and delicate. He couldn't stop himself. He opened his mouth and bit down. Asher grunted, his body tensing, the hand on the back of Leo's head tightening its grip. The rest was a blur. When he opened his eyes again, the angry red tooth marks on Asher's neck were the first thing he saw. Fragments of memory assaulted him. He tried to bolt, but Asher, half asleep, grabbed his sleeve and asked where he was going. To feed the cat, Leo mumbled. Richie needed to be fed every day. The marks on his neck filled him with a rare shame. Asher wouldn't let him go. He reasoned that after the heavy rain last night, the cat might be sick. Before Leo could argue, Asher preempted him. His voice slurred with sleep, saying he'd already brought the cat in. He got up and retrieved Richie from the bathroom. Around Richie's neck was Asher's bracelet. In the center was an intricately crafted golden sun studded with diamonds. Leo couldn't identify the brand but guessed it was some niche, obscenely expensive designer. The two words written in every detail were deathly expensive. He turned it over and saw an inscription on the back. Richie. The handwriting was clear, the strokes sharp. Asher held Richie and asked Leo why he hadn't brought him home before, since he obviously cared so much. Leo thought about it. The answer was simple and stupid, because Caleb hated cats. And because Caleb hated them, Leo wasn't allowed to like them. Too ashamed to admit this, he fumbled for an excuse. Before he could speak, Richie urinated all over Asher. Ah, my watch! Asher shrieked, all thoughts of the previous question gone. He clutched his hair in despair, yelling that the cat had peed on his watch. Leo struggled to suppress a smile, explaining that the cat just liked him and got overexcited. He offered to pay for the watch, trying to placate him. Asher's sleepiness vanished as he stormed into the bathroom, cursing. The sound of the shower started. A moment later, Asher called out to him from the bathroom. Leo cautiously approached. The door was open a crack, steam pouring out. He could just make out Asher's dim figure inside. He averted his eyes and saw the watch tossed carelessly by the sink. His own eyes darkened instantly. It was a Patek Philippe 5270G. He couldn't afford that even if he sold himself and Richie. Being a benefactor was not easy. The next second, Asher aimed the showerhead at his hair. Leo burst in and grabbed his hand, demanding to know if he had a death wish. He scolded him for getting the wound wet and jammed a shower cap on his head. The scent of bergamot shower gel bloomed in the humid air, wrapping around him. The skin where he held Asher's wrist felt hot. Asher raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Leo let go abruptly and turned away. Asher's hand was red from his grip. He emerged from the bathroom with a towel wrapped loosely around his waist, threatening to fall with every step. The cat was pestering him to wind up its toy mouse. Asher carried the cat to its bed, then took Leo's hand and placed it on his own head. "You touch it," he murmured, "it's more fun for me." Leo was stunned for a moment, then, choosing his words carefully, asked if he could possibly be more restrained. He was almost amused. Hearing this, Asher adjusted the towel slightly, covering the top but not the bottom. Leo fled to the closet to find him some clothes. Asher was surprisingly easy to please, not picky about clothes or food. But that watch was a problem. Leo grabbed a shirt and called his name twice with no reply. A flicker of unease went through him. "Asher?" He found him standing silently in front of his studio. Richie had nudged the door open. Inside, an easel was still set up. On the watercolor paper was an almost finished portrait of Caleb. Asher was shrouded in a thick, terrible silence. Leo's throat went dry, he couldn't speak. Then Asher broke the silence with a dramatic, choked sob. "Richie, your father has abandoned us, hiding other men in the house behind my back. Let's run away from home." Those last words made a vein throb in Leo's forehead. He suppressed his irritation. "Don't say that in front of the child. Richie, your father is cruel to me. I can't live like this." Asher continued his performance, hugging the easel. He's still thinking about that pretty boy. "In this big house, there's not a single person on my side." He could see Leo's darkening mood and was deliberately trying to lighten it. Leo was silent for a long moment. "Tell me," he finally said, "what do you want me to paint?" Asher wiped away his fake tears and produced the photo from his pocket like a treasure. "This one," he said. "It has you, Richie, and me. What harm could a puppy with amnesia do?" Leo clipped the photo to the corner of the drawing board. Asher sat beside him, watching intently. The background was a wash of rich green and the memory of April blossoms. The golden sun pendant was around Richie's neck, his furry tail wrapped around Leo's wrist. The cat rubbed its head against Asher's hand. In the painting, Asher wore the gray hooded sweatshirt, his eyelids drooping lazily. He was handsome even without smiling, but with a smile he was magnetic. "Leo, did you know you have a red mole under your eye?" Leo raised his eyebrows. Asher held up a wet paintbrush, a dot of crimson on its tip, and touched it to the skin just below Leo's eye. That spot of red was particularly striking. Asher didn't know it, but Leo had already painted a picture of them. On that rainy night, when mist rose from the street, they had kissed under the umbrella. In that painting, Asher's eyes were closed. His sharp-boned hands tangled in Leo's hair. Just the two of them. A red tooth mark was on his neck. Richie wasn't in that one. It wasn't for children to see. So, in this new painting, he wrote Richie's name on the sun pendant. He framed the dried flower Asher had given him. The first step to supporting Asher was getting back the money Caleb had stolen. Leo submitted all the auction house appraisals and the contracts Caleb had signed, along with the pitifully small payment records. He hadn't cared before, but now he wasn't alone. A young master was expensive to maintain. This was a civil dispute, and while the amount was huge, it wouldn't put Caleb away for good. Caleb was still in the hospital. When he received the court summons, he called Leo, screaming that he was insane. He had built his career on Leo's work, and now he had the audacity to accuse him of blackmail. It wasn't even a tenth of what he'd taken. Leo said calmly, "Clinical trial falsification, false reports concealing adverse reactions." There was a pause on the other end, then an immediate panic denial. The drug N12, which a doctor had mentioned offhandedly, was a new product from Caleb's company. Leo had spent a long time digging up information online, finding both the drug's details and the families of its victims. He continued, "The core theory for the first generation of N12 came from my college thesis. I know the side effects better than you do. Caleb, you stole my research and built your fortune on human lives. Do you have a conscience?" They had graduated at the same time. Because of his mental health issues, Leo couldn't handle the stress of research, so those papers only bore Caleb's name. Caleb spoke quickly, defensively, "You're always so idealistic. All medicines have risks within a controllable range. Besides, they were terminally ill. I was giving them hope." Leo sneered. "Your company is about to go public, isn't it? Once data falsification is proven, the pharmaceutical company and its researchers are blacklisted for life." Caleb gritted his teeth. "What do you want?" "Give me back the money from the paintings," Leo said, his voice even. "And my mother's portrait." Caleb was incredulous. "You're going through all this just for money?" Money was the one thing Caleb didn't lack now. He had to know. "For who?" "Asher," Leo said frankly. "I want to buy him a watch." Caleb was choked into silence. In his experience, Leo never did anything without a purpose, and that purpose was usually to torment him. He managed to say 2 words, laced with venom. "Good. Good." He spat that Leo had once claimed to love him so much, had been reluctant to ask for anything, and now he was willing to spend millions on this new man without blinking. He was so generous. "I wonder if he'll even remember you when he gets his memory back." Leo was silent for a moment. Was it important? He had once been ready to sign over his apartment, had humbled himself to borrow money from everyone he knew, had locked himself in his studio day and night, allowing publishers to use his illness as a selling point. He had even painted forgeries, all to pay off Caleb's debts. And what had Caleb done? He'd talked about conscience right up until the end. So what if Asher didn't remember? He would just return to his normal life. He wouldn't be dead. Feelings weren't everything. Leo would be miserable without him, but it would just mean adding a few more pills to his daily regimen. No big deal. Still, he couldn't help but ask Caleb, "What was Asher to you?" "Just a dog I kept around," Caleb sneered. "You're the only idiot who treats him like a treasure." Leo hung up. The money was transferred with surprising speed. His mother's portrait was delivered by courier. Of course, it wasn't just about the money. Everything Caleb had said on the phone was now recorded, another piece of evidence. Only a complete chain could nail him to the pillar of shame for good. When he brought the watch home, Asher was stunned. He didn't take it. First, his gaze swept around the room, a flicker of something unfamiliar, something sharp, in his eyes. He looked at the furniture, the paintings on the wall, and then finally at Leo.